But let's get started. So for everyone who doesn't know who I am on the phone, I guess on the Zoom, my name is Sapna Shah. I'm the founder of Retail X Series. I'm an angel investor. I invest at Preseed in the future of retail. We have been doing these sessions kind of weekly, bi-weekly. There will be 2 more this summer in July, topics and speakers TBD. And then we'll take a break in August before we go back to September. And one day maybe we'll do these again in person and not have to do them over Zoom, which I would personally appreciate.
Yes.
I think everybody would appreciate
we
that.
all please, let's get together. Just as look at each other.
This session is being recorded. You can find it afterwards on the Retail X YouTube channel, along with a number of the other ones that we've done of these virtual sessions. We will get to questions in the end for the first half hour or so. I have questions for Kobi, and then we will get to audience questions, which you can put into the chat either throughout our conversation or towards the time when we get to audience Q&A. And with that, Kobi, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Visuwall.
Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. Happy afternoon. My name is Kobi Wu. I'm the founder and CEO of Visuwall Technologies, Visuwall with love. What we are is computer vision. We're a computer vision company that we apply to storefronts, monetizing those storefronts and giving advertisers insights, consumer insights about their journey and along the way. And we're in the middle of a COVID-19 induced, I don't like the word pivot, but it is technically a pivot where we're designing a new user case, which will be applying our technology to retail.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So we are going to start talking here. We're talking about raising a pre-seed round. So let's start off with before you raised any money in your round. Had you raised any other money, like a friends and family or an accelerator round, anything prior to raising sort of a proper pre-seed round?
So the answer to that is no. I am not privy or have a whole bunch of wealthy friends. So we didn't do technically a friends and family round. What we did was we bootstrapped. We, pulled together what we needed to do, use the least expensive solutions along the way. And we didn't let the fact that we didn't have technology design stop us from implementing a technology company. We just hustled it and used Excel spreadsheets and that kind of thing to get to the point where we had a minimum viable solution, just figuring out if people wanted to buy it, and we moved on from there.
Okay, so great. So then you went out, so you had Bootstrap for a while, you came up with a minimum viable solution, which I like better than minimum viable product. So
right.
I'll be using that from now on.
Thank you.
So
you can have
it. So then you went out to raise your pre-seed. So let's kind of walk through that process step by step. So how much first of all, when was that just in terms of time, like when in history was that? And then how did you decide how much to raise?
So always good questions. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm reaching because my dog just walked in, literally let himself in the room and walked in. The business started technically at the end of 2015. So we weren't actually operating fully until 2017, where we started generating revenue. And I found that with what we were doing, it was oddly unique. And so we just had to prove it. And in the process was able to generate, a couple $100,000 in our first year, did it again the next year. And in the middle of that next year, we were like, hey, we need some money to actually build this thing. And so we went out to do a raise that would help us with product development and, getting us out the door, focusing on sales.
And so how did you decide how much to raise? I feel like you and I had many conversations.
Oh gosh.
About how to decide how much to raise.
Walk
us through the process.
Well, yeah, no, the way we went about it was we talked about what do we need, right? Like what would we need to get through 12 months or 18 months? And in fact, I think you said, okay, what do you need for 12 months? And then I was like, okay, X. And then you were like, okay, now do it for 18. Like, just make sure you have the money that you can raise that will help you get there. And I will say that when I first started, I thought I was going to raise a seed, for $2 million right out the bat. I thought that that was the thing that you're supposed to do. First time founder. So you're going after millions right out the bat. And for what we were doing, I think we were able to, just kind of refine our need and get down to about $500,000. And we were like, okay, well, that will help us build a product and get out for sales. We were already making money. So why did we need $2 million, right? Like, exactly. It was this cushion. It was this kind of theory that we needed to have everything in our financial projections answered when we actually only needed like a little bit of product. Let's just do the first version of the product and going from there. And then that was labeled as a pre-seed, which frankly, I only learned during the process. Like the pre-seed was this $2 million tier. But if you do a pre-seed that's like, $500,000 or $250,000, you can start cooking with grease with that actually. And it felt like the right tier to go with. And it's not for everybody, but I felt like the pre-seed was the right way to go about it. It still put us in the market to eventually do a raise at a higher valuation. We could still continue to, generate revenue and establish ourselves in the process. So we went after $500,000 and we eventually kind of oversubscribed to 650, which was great.
And which is great. So what sort of metrics or proof of concept or traction did you have to show to those pre-seed investors at that time?
So, what's interesting is the traction that I thought we would be able to get away with, right, was considering our model. We were going to go after occupying vacant storefronts. So how many storefronts do we need to prove that we have something that landlords would be interested in? And then we got to about 100 and everybody was like, okay, great. How many sales do you have? And I was like, oh, let's go and do that. So let's go find some advertisers that would pay. How much would they pay? Would it be recurring? And then, kind of establish that. And for me, the goal was saying, hey, people will actually use our product. Our target consumer will use our product more than once. And if I could prove that and assign a dollar amount to that, at least on an annual basis, then we could start proving through the next tier. And then I started thinking about, do we need to be an MRR model? Can we assign those metrics? And I started going down the rabbit hole of like the metrics that investors want, when at the end of the day, I just had to kind of hold steadfast on what I knew we wanted to provide. Here's 100 locations. We were able to occupy 20% of them. This is the money that we generated and going from there. And then it kind of helped my investors get educated on what was priority for us, what the KPIs were for us. And now we're looking at a more nimble solution that allows us to kind of align with some of the more traditional ways VCs think, right? MRR, how many units, repeatable stuff, and what's the churn, yada, yada, yada. So.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm glad you talked about this because it's interesting that you mentioned that you had to get the investors to understand what your KPIs were because, your model was a little different than I think, you were talking to a lot of investors sort of in the marketing tech space, and then people who are interested on the real estate side, right? Yeah. And those two groups tend to have sort of different viewpoints on metrics. Right. And yet you had this marketplace of empty storefronts, but you were doing advertising, but then there was this computer vision component, and it was all very complicated.
For someone who doesn't know what we're talking about at all, super complicated, yes. Makes their head spin.
And so how did you convince those investors that the metrics that you're talking about were the right ones, given the nature of your business, that MRR, for example, was not the thing to be looking for your business?
So I will say, I will say there were some investors who weren't going to talk to me anyway, just because we didn't speak in the language that they did. And I had to accept that and just find people who were a little bit more innovative and understood the vision for the business, that we did intend to get to that model, but we had to prove that people would even pay the money that they would do for a billboard in a window. Like, will they pay $20,000 for a window for a month versus spending that money on a traditional billboard? And for a lot of people, they didn't understand if it was viable, if that was a real option, right? They also didn't understand if it was like kind of guerrilla marketing. And so we had to spend a lot of time just generating case studies that showed what it looked like, how it worked. And hey, yeah, we can repeat this every month, provided we have the right supply and the demand is there. And I would indicate how many people were always asking for inventory, and the demand is never an issue in terms of advertisers. And then the other thing that I did was I convinced investors to know who I was, right? Like I came from the advertising and marketing space. I know for a fact that my user group, me, would spend the money on this innovation. So as long as we had the supply to do it. And I think that that's what ultimately convinced the investors that came on with us for Preseed to understand that we had something that was really cool. If it can be done, she's going to pull it off. It was kind of that mindset. And if she fails, then we'll be like, oh yeah, well, we knew that we weren't sure if it was going to work out, one of those kinds of things. But so far, so good, like knock on wood. It's just been a function of, okay, now we have analytics. We're able to show people now that they've sold the window, let's sell the window. Hey, by the way, here's analytics that come with that window. How valuable is that to the user set that we were looking at the time, which was out-of-home advertisers, right? How valuable is that? Do they want that on a regular basis? Can it be applied to any other user set?
Yeah, that was really helpful. So at that time, as you went out to raise, you mentioned the word we a lot. Did you have a big team?
No, we is like me and you and anybody else who would listen, right? I mean, it was, I had a real estate person who would help me acquire our locations. I had an advertising salesperson who would go out and, just field all of the potential buyers. And it was just the three of us kind of running around. And then there would be iterations, like maybe somebody would leave because they were looking for higher commissions. And, we would have to balance the people coming and going. So when I say we, though, it is a collective we, because I had to stay in touch with landlords. I had to stay in touch with advertisers. I had to stay in touch with my team. And in the beginning, it was a haul. But then I relied on my advisors, Sapna, and a few other people that were really great with me, gave me some tips on, hey, stay calm, stay focused on this, like don't get distracted with the other options right now, and really just kind of making sure that we proved each tier. So, it's interesting because the first investors wasn't an angel that I just happened upon and pitched and they said yes. It was me pitching at a competition and winning that competition. And that first micro check, which wasn't so micro, but $7,500 was like, woohoo, we're cooking with grease, And then that win exposed us to press and, other people who would say, hey, I want to know more about this. And not for nothing, that win brought my investors to the table.
I'm so glad you pivoted to this, because it was actually that win and an article I saw about it that made me think I need to talk to her. Yeah. And then somebody simultaneously reached out to me.
That's right.
And I was like, I have the tab open on my computer to this
article. Yes, you did say that.
Get in touch with Kobi. That's a great segue to kind of how you look for angels, family offices, VCs, strategic investors at the pre-seed stage, which I think for a lot of founders, certainly that I talk to within the retail community and just in the world, it's really hard to go out and find those people. So it sounds like that pitch competition and winning it and getting that press was really helpful. What else did you do to target people? And did you go and target kind of VCs and angels simultaneously, mostly angels? Like, where was the inbound coming from and what outbound did you do?
Okay, so when I first started, I literally knew no one in the VC world or angel world. Probably not so uncommon for founders, right? Well, at least now 4.5 years in, I definitely know that's not uncommon. People are like, how do I find an investor? We don't know. But you just dive in, and that first win or handshake with somebody who happens to be an investor is literally opens up the floodgates in terms of like your connectivity. I think for a founder of color also, it's also like this weird daunting experience because it's not like there's a network in my immediate ecosystem that says, hey, I know 3 or 4 investors that you need to meet today to get feedback, getting that specific feedback. But I came across, a gentleman named Kevin Tung, who's at Interplay VC, who is, a really good, friendly VC who introduced me to a ton of people in his network who all said no, by the way. They all said no. But what it did was give me practice to learn what I'm saying and how people would respond to what I was saying. And I had to really refine that over time because I think that there were certain trigger words that would make people say, oh, this is great. What's the traction? And I would say, oh, I have 10 locations. They would say, what's the traction? I would say, what do you mean? I had to learn that. So finding the angels in that way, I would say Kevin kind of kicked me off. Happening upon a competition called Black Women Talk Tech, I applied to, pitch, was accepted, went to the conference of the day or two prior to the pitch to kind of circle the room, and happened upon the judge, one of the judges for the pitch, who quickly like excused herself from our conversation because she realized I was pitching her in a couple of hours. But she ended up writing that first check with the rest of that panel. And then from there, that network of people continued to, literally on that day, the luck of winning introduced me to folks who would just walk up to me. But since then, it's been strategically looking for people who are interested in my field: real estate, advertising, computer vision, right? Those are the things that I kind of focused at. If you know the business, my business, at least a fraction of it, I can probably pitch you the rest. And I realized that I didn't want to talk to people who knew nothing about it anymore. I was like, let's not do that. That's going to be too painful. Let's just focus on a user set of folks that we know will be responsive and at least engage. So now I'm a little bit more savvy. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and it's amazing how many, the Twitter ecosystem of VCs and founders and everybody's talking about. You can really learn a lot about who's investing in at what stage. And there's no shortage of resources out there. In fact, at the moment, it's kind of like, because everybody's sitting around on their phones all the time, you're constantly seeing stuff online. Here's a list of people who are investing in Preseed, Seed, Series A, Series B, and, ongoing. So it's a good time.
How long did it take you kind of from start to finish to raise that round?
About a year. I think that it's also funny too, because there's this language that goes around like, okay, so when are you raising? And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm always raising, right? And when are you closing your round? That kind of interesting start-stop that creates, FOMO, fear of missing out from investors, right? I could say I'm raising in September and I want to be done by the holidays. And if I have a lead, that's probably likely. But if you don't have a lead, it might take you a little bit longer, right? Now I'm kind of getting outside of a pre-seed, but it's an interesting process to kind of figure out what your criteria is and what your barometer is for success. Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about kind of hearing no from everybody that Interplay introduced you to. So you heard a lot of no's. Did any of those no's ever really turn into a yes? Did you give up on those people? Are they dead to you now? What?
Yes, they're dead to me. Actually, none of them turned into yeses, but a lot of them have turned into, hey, I'm seeing how you're doing. I wanted to have a check-in. Are you, do you want to schedule some time? And I always say yes to that because, their thesis might have changed. My focus may have more aligned with what they're talking about. And, reality is 3.5 years ago when I first started talking to investors, I've learned a lot. So why not take that call again? but I cannot say that I've turned around and been like, huh, I'm not going to take your check. I've not gotten to that point yet.
I don't know who gets to that point, but yes.
I know, right?
So you also were in an accelerator program. Did that
Yeah.
help you in raising Preseed in terms of introductions or pitch practice or any of those things?
It's funny because for me, I did an accelerator called XRC Labs, and I actually was generating revenue already, and I wanted their money, not just for the money, but for the demo day. You know what I mean? I wanted to participate in that network. And I learned a lot about the retail segment, which curiously I'm now, applying Visuwall to. So I looked at that accelerator experience as, yes, income for the business, capital for the business, but it also helped me strategically with network, with partnerships, and, just kind of expansion of who I wanted to talk to. So it wasn't, for me, I didn't do an accelerator program before we got out the door, where I think a lot of people do and get that traction. I used it as part of my round.
Yeah. And did that demo day highlight you to a different set of investors than you might have otherwise found?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten exposure to people in the real estate game, which I think a lot of people, if anybody's on the thread or the Zoom with real estate experience, it's kind of a legacy business, and my family's not in the real estate game here in New York. So for me, it was a great exposure to talk to people who are developing properties for the retail business. So I was able to meet that group of folks. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't have met these people on my own. I probably could have down the line, but it just did what it was supposed to do, accelerate the process a bit. Some of those people were claimed to be interested in what we were doing for possible investment. They passed, and a couple of them said, I want to write you a check. And I got a couple of them from that demo day. So that ended up being a part of my pre-seed round. So
that's great.
Success, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what structure did you end up using for your round?
For the pre-seed, I did a safe note.
And when you were deciding that, this is a question we get all the time. I think a lot of founders are like, should I do a safe? Should I do a convertible note? Really, at Preseed, nobody ever does an equity round. It's just too expensive.
Right.
How did you choose to do a safe?
So I had heard about a convertible note first, right? And when you look at the structure of a convertible note and the elements that are typically included, it inherently infers a valuation of some kind. And so as a founder, you have to decide whether or not it's the time for that. The safe was a little bit more flexible. I was cautioned quite a bit from advisors like you and other people who were like, if you're not careful, you might give away too much of your business because you're not establishing a valuation now, or you don't know how this could, explode on your cap table and take away too much equity from yourself. So, the diligence and the onus was on me to manage that process. So I felt like I could do it safe. I knew that there were going to be very few people on the cap table and that I could manage it. And I put some timelines in my safe to allow me to kind of know, have as a founder know when things were going to convert or need to convert. So it's good for people, founders, to consider and read templates of what a safe looks like versus a convertible note. And then also know that some investors will not invest in a safe note. They would prefer a convertible note. So you're making those decisions for them. And you can also look at, if you some sort of combination, but then it puts you in a weird, you're managing too much. You got to try to run the business. Pre-seed, you just got to focus on the business.
Fair, very fair. So now looking back, you had looked to raise 500, you ended up oversubscribing. So that is a success, right? Looking back though, do you think that there are anything you would have done differently as you went out to raise your pre-seed, or any mistakes that you made that you wish, you could kind of rewind, go back and do again?
I mean, yes and no, right? From, a emotional perspective, I feel like I wouldn't trade everything that I've done. I wouldn't trade anything because the learnings were great, right? I'm a mom. That's how I don't regret, no regrets. Um, but from a tactical perspective, sure, I would have changed some things. I probably would have done an accelerator. I might not actually have done an accelerator at all. I might have said, I don't want to go through a 3-month, 6-month, program. I'm actually savvy enough to meet investors. I can do this, right? I don't have to give away equity with an accelerator program when I'm not ready to, right? I may have said, nah, I'm not going to do that. I would have potentially looked at a timeline for myself a little bit more steadfastly instead of letting it go, like kind of doing a rolling round. And I think other than that, I feel like the journey was required. Like otherwise, how would you, as a founder, know whether or not you're really successful?
Yeah, I mean that's sort of an interesting kind of take on it, especially the thing about the timing, because I think that the timing of pre-seed rounds is actually one of the tougher things. Is that creating that FOMO or that calendar? It's actually really hard if you're trying to run a business, right?
Yeah.
Um, is Do you think kind of going forward, and you mentioned kind of a seed round, time boxing and thinking about, you know, prep or any of those things that maybe you hadn't done last time, that you would really think about kind of what the goal would be to kind of get a round done? Like what would be your ideal timing? I mean, obviously ideal timing would be like one day and done.
Right. I'm done.
But realistic ideal timing.
Yeah. It's kind of tricky. I would look at it like, a 3-month window is great because fundraising is no joke, right? It takes so much of your time. You're getting to know someone new who you're getting ready to give. You're basically giving away your company in bits and pieces, right? In terms of equity. And I think that the value in going through the process is they're investing in you. And sometimes as a founder, you feel like you have to do the dance to get them on board. But I think at the same time, as you kind of progress as a founder, it turns into, I'm going to give you some of my business and you don't have to do anything. Like the tone changes. And so I think when it's easier to create that FOMO because your confidence changes, right? Like if I said, I'm going to do this in 3 months, I now know that in order to actually do that, I already have to know who I'm going to. And so that research process that took me the first 9 months in my first, my pre-seed is now like, no, here's who I'm going to go after. And I've warmed them up already. And I'm going to open up this conversation and boom, now let's do this. And I think that's how you establish that timeline. Here's the 3-month window. It's going to take me 2 weeks to get all these emails out. Then I'm going to schedule them. It's literally going through that process, getting interviews, getting that second interview or conversation, going through diligence or whatever it takes, and then closing, right? But being able to say to people, here's a couple of milestones that I have going on with the business. We want to get this done before X. And then that way, everybody kind of understands what they're dealing with. If you don't have those mechanics to give people, it becomes, kind of an open window. You can't really rush anybody because you're not rushing. So I think those are kind of the tactics that I would use to kind of expedite the process the next time.
Got it. So I have one more question. So for the people listening on the call, if you've got questions, this is the time to start putting them into the chat. But I will end with my kind of one question that I always ask in these things is, if you had one piece of advice, and you've already given many pieces of advice, but if you had the one critical piece of advice that you would give to founders on this call who are about to start raising their pre-seed round, what would that piece of advice be?
Go with your 100% self, your full self all the time. I think that women founders, women of color founders, people of color founders, you tend to have you may not have the confidence when you're first getting going, right? But you have to show up and give them your entire self, so that they know what they're investing in, and it actually helps things move along a little bit faster, I think. My mom advice.
I love that though. But so what, I mean, can you give me an example of what that means of maybe when you weren't being yourself, and then when you were, and maybe the different outcomes that happened from that?
Yeah. So I remember sitting on a panel with, a bank. It was for another program, if you will, and some very important people that I've recognized in the Twitter world. I won't mention names because it's not disparaging, but it's not positive, right? But they grilled me. They grilled me like to the point where I was like, whoa, like let's take a minute. And they were like, well, wait, are you a marketplace or are you technology business? Like, what are you doing? And it was the tone that set me back on my heels for a minute. But what I did was I shook it off and I was just like, wait a minute. Let's start again. You missed something in the beginning. It was a little bit of confidence, a little bit of attitude that helped me say, wait, I know what I'm talking about. Perhaps you missed a couple of beats, without being disrespectful, just kind of flipping the tone. And that's my true self. Like, before I might have said, okay, I'm sorry, let's try to work through this again. And I would have repeated myself, but it really is about, just owning it. Like, say, this is a conversation, people. Like, you don't have to jam me up. This is truly, an exchange. I want us to be partners if it's a good fit. And if it's not, it's cool. Let's just cut this off and keep going. That's an authenticity on my part that I've learned to not get it helps me not get my feelings so hurt. It helps me just kind of push through to the next meeting and just realize it's just a meeting, and they may have missed out, or they may, have just not seen the vision, and that's okay.
Yeah, I'm really glad you have kind of ended with this, because I think this is a really important point, that sometimes there just isn't a personal fit. And if you're an investor and a founder who are kind of trying to make a match, the investor wants to invest in your company, but really at this early stage, they're really investing in you. There can be pivots, there can be a global pandemic in the middle, and whatever, all kinds of things can happen. But the average relationship between an investor, early stage investor, and a founder lasts like 7 to 9 years. So that's a long time to be in a relationship with somebody who is not a personal fit for you.
Right.
Having said that, I'm sure as a founder, it's really hard to turn away money if that person is still offering you money.
That's true. That's true. But you should be okay with it. And you should also say, let me approach this differently. Do you know what I mean? So it's certainly, there's an attraction, I think, as founders for us to go after the big name VCs, and try to be a part of a major portfolio so that you can win. But I don't necessarily subscribe to that anymore. I think I was attracted to it to kind of see. I wanted to know what's behind the glass. But now I'm kind of like, you know what? They're coming anyway. You'll see them at the next dinner. You will get to know them on your own, and they can potentially be an ally for you anyway. And so it's not, you don't have to put that pressure on yourself, right? And try to compete with so many other people. There's tons of funds and people who are interested in investing in great founders. And so you just need to find that fit,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that was it for my questions, although I could probably come up with more.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions, please put them in the chat. Oh, there we go. Now I see questions in the chat. All right, I will read them out so that everybody can read them. So the first question is, after developing your minimum viable solution and raising pre-seed capital, did you outsource the CV development or hire full-time engineers? If you did the latter, what was that process like?
So I went after full-time engineering team, and I ended up outsourcing. The full-time engineering process for me was a little daunting because I am not a technical founder. I wanted it, for me, I realized that the skill sets are, you can find great engineers, and they will be a pill to work with. You can't, as a founder, kind of work with them and build that relationship. It might not be worth it, and the stress just to go quickly. So I didn't outsource, and to be honest, the outsourcing solution they are a great long-term solution for us, and we'll continue to work with them.
So I'm going to ask you a follow-up to that because this is actually a really good point. A lot of times I hear other investors say, well, they're outsourcing their technology. I'm
Yeah.
not going to invest in a company that is outsourcing technology because then what do they really own? Like, well, what's unique about this company then? Because that is not in-house. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah, well, I heard, so to clarify, it's our tech, like whatever we designed is our tech. So we had to structure our deals or our team with it, structure our contract with the team so that the handover was there, that we owned all of the assets. But to your point, investors will say, oh, who's your tech team, right? And while I don't have a tech founder, co-founder, I'm very transparent and I say that, we have our technical team that's led by a partner of ours, right? A strategic partner of ours. And what I'm doing with that team actually is identifying people along the way that could actually come in at some point. And that's, for me, a great process. I don't know if it would work for everybody because our technology, once we have it and it works, we just need to kind of continue to build on it. So structuring that contract, number one, so that you own everything is key. Making sure that you work with a team that that you can communicate with and that you get along with is also key. We don't want any mishaps where someone steals something and you're like stuck all of a sudden. And just making sure that as you're going along, you're staying open to who's around and who's coming to you, because I have found inadvertently people in my inbox that I didn't go to, because they were interested in what we were doing. And those are good people. If they're coming to you, they're great people.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Next question. Hi, Kobi. Thanks for sharing all your learnings. Did you ever consider working with a co-founder, and did you get pushback from investors as a solo founder? Mm-hmm. Also, you mentioned that you were already up and running when you went out to raise and investors were asking for your traction. Could you offer more details about I can't even speak today. Could you offer more details around how much you were running? For example, how many paying clients you already had? Okay, that was like a lot of questions. The first question was, did you ever consider a co-founder, and did you get pushback as a solo founder?
Yeah, and I had some tough learnings in establishing co-founders, right? I worked with a web developer to be a co-founder. So they are technically on my cap table even to this day. They're not active. And so how much of a bummer is that to give away a company and they don't want to do anything after a certain number of months? So technical or founders, yes, but if it's for services that you could probably pay for at some point, I would recommend just paying for it and just unless it was their idea. There's all kinds of reasons to look at it, but I would just look at a co-founder scenario as somebody who you're definitely going to go down the journey with. They will put in the work and roll up their sleeves, because the worst thing that could happen is that they abandon the project. So having a co-founder, I would love a co-founder. I would love, support sometimes. And being a solo founder, yes, investors have said, hey, is she going to be able to pull this off by herself? After a couple of years of creating traction, quote unquote, by myself, that those questions have silenced. They're not as much of an issue. So yes, I think I answered that.
Okay. And then the next part of this question, this multi-part question, was could you offer more details around your traction when you went out to raise? For example, how many paying clients you already had?
Yeah, so when I first went out, for our model, I went out with, total number of properties, which we would be selling. I wanted to prove that landlords would be interested in our process and generating revenue in this way. The second thing that I was able to kind of present over time was how many clients would come to the table within a certain number of months. So, not bragging or anything, but humble brag. My first client was Apple Music. So that's kind of get a established client to kind of buy what you're selling. It kind of helps people it proves to people that you've got an interesting product that should be paid attention to. It wasn't about the number of clients. It was about the quality of clients and where they came from. So how did you get Apple Music, Kobi? Okay, well, yes, I had a couple of friends that I networked with to get in touch with their agency who ultimately did the buy, right? Whoever's paying for it, how did you get to them, Kobi? How did you prove this through? And then how many times did you have to go that hard? Is this going to get easier? Can you just put your inventory in a funnel so that it's not as much of the CAC isn't as high? How are you going to get these people? And so for me, that's the traction that I had to establish and learn that was the most important metrics for investors over time.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point about the quality of, from a B2B perspective, the quality of the names really does matter at Preseed. Like if it's a company nobody's ever heard of, versus if it's Apple Music, that is much more compelling for sure.
Right.
Okay, great. Next question. Do you have any regrets in terms of how much control you gave away and at what stages?
Yeah. Yes, the answer to that is yes. But I don't, you know what? I feel like, again, there's ways to kind of manage your business. It's your business. I still have the majority of ownership. Over time, I've become less clinched with equity and understand, like, it's more about, for me, equity is earned with either money or time. So if you've invested a lot of money, then yes, you deserve equity. That helps us move faster. Or if you were the one that helped us drive time. So now I'm more about, like, if you vest whatever that amount of time is, then you can earn the equity over 2 years or whatever that is. And then that way I feel less burdened with, I've given away a piece of my business. I think in the early stages doing that, I to the exact point, yes, I was upset about it in the beginning and quickly got over it because I realized that everybody gets diluted. There's certain mechanics in raising that allow things to not feel as pained over the process over time. But I think that that's something that as a founder, people will go through those bumps and bruises. And at the same time, your business is still going to be fantastic, right? Like 70, 80, 90% or 100% of a business is making no money with no learnings is not so valuable,
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that too, because I think one of the questions that I always talk to founders about, or issues I talk to founders about, is when they are concerned about dilution, is understanding that you have to have some dilution, but the more co-founders you have, the more that dilution is going to hurt you at every round or at every stage where you have money. So as a solo founder, you have a little less concern about that, right?
Right, exactly.
All right.
It's something, honestly, Sapna, like, as we're talking about it, you and I have known each other for a couple years now. It's easy for us to say that today, but when you were telling me that 2 years ago, I was like, no, I'm not having a good time. Like, help me stop crying right now. But it's fine. It's
it's been a long couple of years.
Yes, it has.
All right, this next question, and Casey, it's from Casey, and Casey, I'm not 100% sure what you mean here, but can you double down on the investor conversations re being a solo founder?
Meaning, like,
I'm not sure.
Investors keep coming after me?
Oh, how did you respond? Yes, to those investor conversations about being a solo founder. Casey is also a solo founder, so that's why she's asking.
Okay. No, I mean, for me, the double down was, or, the way I responded to any investors who had, like, honestly, it depends on the way that they ask the question, right? Like, if they said it, hey, Kobi, how do you feel as a solo founder, right? To me, that expresses a little bit of concern and support for you, for me, Kobi, as a founder. Like, how do you handle this, right? Because it's a lot of weight to manage an entire business. You're one human being. You're going to carry all the tears. You're going to carry all the glory, but you're literally by yourself. So, like, are you good? That's the way I take that question. In the inverse, when somebody is like, hey, you're a solo founder, how are you going to handle X when, Y comes up in the technical space, or something like that. And I'm like, hey, listen, everybody goes through those kinds of issues. And it takes me a second to just, get the resolve and saying, what do they really want to understand about, what question are they asking? What's the root of it? And sometimes we go back and forth about that. And other times it's just like, you know what, there's not a single person out here who doesn't have competition or have trials and have to like go to their advisors. And I have a good advisor group, so advisors and investors that I can go to on anything. And they're very responsive. So that's how I would answer that. I hope that helpful, Casey.
Great. Next question. How did you eventually come up with a valuation on your business?
So curiously, I still don't have a valuation on the business, which now that I'm going out with a convertible note, it does infer a certain cap, right? Or establishes a cap, which infers the valuation. And I did that based on the revenue that we were creating year over year. Is it 5X? Is it 3X? What's realistic? The lead on my seed round will help me establish the valuation.
Yeah, I think I'll just add there that valuation at the early stages is more of an art than a science. I think the only rule of thumb that I can really come up with is don't give up more than 20, 25% of your company in any of the early rounds, which means the more you're raising, the higher the valuation should be. If you can't raise that much, the valuation comes down, that's sort of how it works. The other one point that I will say is that most VCs believe that the pre-seed and seed valuations will be coming down by around 30% by the end of the year, just given COVID, recession, uncertain environment. But yes, like I think as you're talking about kind of it's a negotiation with the lead, I think at the seed round, it very much is a negotiation. I think at pre-seed, it's very much like,
yeah. Yeah. True.
Great. Okay. Next question. How did you find your advisors?
So the advisors came from, in Sapna's case,
an article.
Right. It was kind of like she was going to reach out, and by the time I reached out, she already knew who I was. So that was easy, number one. But I actually met or heard of Sapna through, David Wright Tremaine's. They have a women's group. It was the Women's Entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Or was it Alicia Surratt's group? 0.25.
Either one of those.
Oh gosh. So yeah, So these were both boot camp, entrepreneur boot camps that, you spend an evening and you kind of circulate around a room very awkwardly, but you meet people and you have a kind of do a round robin of meeting people, and you find out, kind of connect with the people who are smiling. I know I'm a very kind of touchy-feely person, but you connect with the people who are responding to you and are knowledgeable about the business. And I, reached out to Sapna and chatted, and then she was like, I'd be happy to. So that was easy. A couple of other advisors I went to were, experts in what I wanted. So like I wanted to have somebody who knows the media and advertising game. I got Marissa Nance. I also wanted to have someone who's really strong on the technical standpoint that also helped answer like, hey, you're a solo founder. Who do you have around you that can help you with that? So someone who's an expert in computer vision is on my advisory. I also have somebody who's very adept at real estate and retail. And so that set of people have become my advisories. And I think over time, I've looked at other people that are like, hey, can I call you every now and again? People are usually very willing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's finding advisors seems to be a lot similar process as finding investors, right? It's the same kind of, you got to find a connection, find skill sets that you are looking for, all of those things. Okay. Next question. Could you please share your approach to researching the right investors for you? How many of your final investors started out as cold calls / they didn't know you at all?
Okay, yes. So the way I researched my investors to begin with, none of them, thinking about it, none of them were cold. Now that I think about it, they were all introduced to me either because of that pitch that I was telling you guys at Black Women Talk Tech, or they saw me pitch at a different you know, in different settings. There was a person who saw me pitch who introduced me to the investor, and it took 3 months for them to come on, but that's how it came on, right? And hey, I know someone who's, I guess they were kind of scouting, right? They were scouting founders. They knew and got to know me and said, I want to introduce you to X. And so that's kind of how I got in touch with my investors. But the research that I did about each of them was, hey, can I introduce you to? And I went straight to my, you know, computer to figure out who they were and what value they could bring. Because at the end of the day, if they're going to be sitting on my cap table, I want to be able to ask them questions and or leverage their network for either follow-on investment or strategic partnerships that they can introduce me to.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think it's still worth raising this year if you can get through it without raising? Meaning, is it a matter of kind of growing faster or slower with or without funding?
Do I think, yes, it is worth raising because for Visuwall, because we have, we need to pivot. We need to invest in salespeople that will focus and hunker down on the business. I have found that salespeople are a special set of people and they are not going to give you their skill set for free. Even if it's full-based commission, they will not do it unless you are paying them. So the investment for this next round will go towards additional round of product and for my salespeople. So yes, it's important for me to do that. It's the only way that we're going to kind of get the speed to market the way that, you know, I want to achieve.
Yeah. Okay, next question. How do you structure your relationships with advisors? Do they invest capital into your business? Do you compensate for their advisory with small equity shares, or are they more informal or mentor style relationships?
I have a combination of that. I have formal agreement. It's a simple FAST agreement. What is it? What does FAST stand for?
I don't remember what.
Something advisory standard template.
What's it called?
FAST. Huh?
Yeah. You can just Google it.
Google FAST.
I Googled it and sent it to you. So
there you go. There you go. Exactly right. Sapna sent me this. She was like, hey, you want to structure an agreement? I was like, okay. But here's the thing. Having gone to Alicia Surratt's 0.25 boot camp, what 0.25 means is that's kind of a standard barometer for how much you could give an advisor to be a part of your team. 0.25%. And if you think about it, it's not a ton of equity, but it's also like it's a token and an exchange for their time, right? So yes, I have a couple of advisors who have signed agreements, and I have a couple who are just committed experts and will get on the phone with me because we're friendly enough to do it. And we do it once a month, sometimes once a quarter, sometimes more than once a month. But my goal is to kind of structure it so that I'm not overburdening the relationship, that it's more like one time a month, 30 minutes, and then they know what they're committing to. And at the same time, I know what I can get. Yeah. It works for everybody, I think, just to kind of structure it that way. And then that way the advisor knows what they need to do. They can come to the meeting knowing how they want to execute. And at the same time, you know what you can expect.
Yeah. The one thing I'll add to that is the way that the FAST agreement works is that the 0.25% is just, it vests over a period of time, so that if the relationship is not working out, you have not given away the full 0.25%, which is actually how all of these things, you know, whether they're options for employees, all of that kind of stuff, the vesting is really helpful.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. The next question is, how do you incentivize an independent board member? Do you have a formal board?
I don't have a formal board, so I can't answer that question.
Yeah, and I have to say, I will answer from my perspective, because independent board members at the early stages usually don't get much, like if there's a board at the pre-seed, which is very rare, they won't get anything. Usually somewhere around a seed round, it would be a similar kind of percent as an advisor, or nothing, honestly. Depends on who that independent board member is. And I think there's no standard at the early stages for independent board members and compensation. It's definitely not like public boards where people get compensated and insurance and all that kind of stuff. I don't see any more questions in the chat. If anybody has one last question, we probably have time for one quick one. But in the meantime, Kobi, I just wanted to say thank you for doing this and sharing your experience and your kind of process for your pre-seed round. And for everybody who's on the call, thank you for joining. If you were on this, you will get added to the RetailX email list if you're not already on it. You will also get an invite to our Slack channel if you're not already on that. You will be able to find the recording of this, as I mentioned, on the RetailX YouTube site and also on the RetailX website. We'll have 2 more sessions in July, topics and speakers TBD, so I will be sending more information out about that shortly. And in the meantime, thank you all very much and have a wonderful day. Thanks, Kobi.
Thanks, Sapna. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.